You stopped answering. No explanation given, no warning sent, no goodbye message. People noticed immediately. They called it cold. They called it rude. They said you changed. They had absolutely no idea what was happening inside your body. Because what they called withdrawal neuroscience calls something else entirely. Your brain was not breaking down. It was switching into a protective state. Researchers at Stanford's Tsai Institute documented this response in detail. They named it emotional load regulation. When relational stress crosses a threshold, your nervous system stops broadcasting outward. It turns inward instead. It seals itself from further input. It begins conserving energy. It starts protecting what remains. You did not abandon anyone. Your brain activated emergency protocol. And the reason it activated is more precise and more important than anyone has ever explained to you. Start here. You were not always the quiet one. Before the disappearing started, you over-explained everything. You apologized constantly. You apologized for needing things. You apologized for having feelings. You softened every request before you even voiced it. You made yourself smaller every single time someone seemed uncomfortable with your presence. None of that happened by accident. Researchers call it Fawn conditioning. It is the learned reflex of placing another person's emotional comfort above your own psychological survival. It is a trauma response. It develops early in life. It runs deep in the nervous system. On the surface, it looks like kindness. Underneath it is pure fear. The fear that your real self is too much for people. Too complicated, too honest, too demanding. So you edited yourself into silence. You did it first before anyone else could. Then one day the editing stopped working. The silence moved in permanently. Here is what almost no one acknowledges. The people who disappear most quietly were always the loudest at asking. They kept asking to stay. They said, "I need space," for years. They set limits that kept collapsing. They explained their pain until explaining felt worthless. They gave people every possible chance to change. The disappearance was not impulsive. It was the conclusion of a process that had been building slowly for a very long time. Your amygdala had processed the same painful pattern one too many times. It stopped expecting a different result. Neuroscientists call this learned helplessness, the point where your brain stops generating effort because outcome data proves clearly that effort no longer changes anything. That is not a character flaw. That is what happens to people who tried too hard for far too long in spaces that did not deserve them. A 2023 NIH study on emotional withdrawal introduced a clinical term worth knowing: relational foreclosure. It is not ghosting. It is not avoidance disorder. It is not emotional immaturity. Relational foreclosure is the moment your prefrontal cortex completes a calculation it has been running for months. The full cost-benefit analysis of a relationship, every single time you were not heard, every boundary that got dismissed, every version of you they preferred was the reduced version, the easy version, the one that never pushed back, the one that never needed anything. The ledger filled without your knowledge. You were not aware it was tracking. Then, one morning it closed. No explosion required. No dramatic confrontation needed. Just a door that quietly stopped opening. Neuroscientists at MIT's McGovern Institute have mapped this exact neurological event. The anterior cingulate cortex gradually reduces its standard empathy output towards sources of chronic relational stress. This is a measured biological adaptation. Your brain physically rewires its circuitry to reduce incoming damage from repeated relational pain. What appears cold from the outside is your neural architecture constructing a protective firewall. And here is the piece you need to sit with. The people who go quiet are not emotionally detached. They feel everything deeply. They disappeared because they felt too much for too long with absolutely nowhere for it to go. Silence became the only pressure valve they had access to. And they used it, not to hurt anyone, to stop hurting themselves. That distinction matters more than most people ever realize. Here is where the narrative inverts. Everyone misreads the quiet ones. They see absence. They decide it is avoidance. They see silence. They decide it is coldness. Harvard's psychology research on emotional regulation in high-sensitivity individuals found something that contradicts that entirely. Withdrawal is not avoidance behavior. It is advanced self-regulation in action. The nervous system executing its function precisely. You were not pulling away from people. You were pulling away from a pattern that had started damaging your processing. Think about when the shift began. It was not a single event. It was a slow accumulation. A look that made you feel stupid. A dismissal that made you feel small. A conversation where your reality was treated as an inconvenience. Repeated enough times, the brain begins relearning safety. It recalibrates who belongs inside its walls. It updates the threat model. Max Planck Institute research on social cognition and belonging thresholds documented a finding most people never hear. Humans tolerate genuine aloneness more effectively than forced connection. Your brain would rather exist in honest solitude than stay surrounded by people requiring a performance from you that stopped being real. The disappearance was not a collapse. It was a correction. A return to your own signal after years inside noise. So what do you do from here? You stop treating the silence as a symptom. The silence is data. It is your nervous system communicating exactly what it requires. Not permanent withdrawal. Not isolation forever. Chosen calibration. You spent years inside environments that framed your limits as dysfunction. Your nervous system adapted accordingly. It learned to survive inside that framing. But surviving an environment and actually living are not the same condition. Stanford research on post-withdrawal recovery followed emotionally exhausted participants through periods of voluntary social silence. The data showed measurable cortisol reduction within 14 days of chosen stillness. Not after months of structured therapy, 14 days. Your brain already has the capacity to reset. It needs one clear signal. That signal comes from you, permission to stop performing closeness you do not currently feel. That permission is yours to give. No one else can authorize it. And you have been waiting for that authorization for too long. The quiet was never the enemy. The performance was. The people worth returning to will not punish your silence. They will recognize it. They will give you room and remain present when you resurface. That is the test that matters. Not what anyone promises. Not what anyone says when pushed. Who stays through your quiet, who does not weaponize your absence, who is simply there when you walk back into the light. Those people were always the point. The silence helped you see them clearly. It removed everything, blocking your view, all of it. And when you return on your own terms, you will know exactly who they are. If you recognized yourself anywhere in this NERO, has more waiting for you. The next video is already there. Your mind deserves to be understood. That journey does not stop here. Your mind is worth understanding fully.